Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. On the last session I talked about keys and a little bit about them, the sharps and the flats and so forth, but the question I didn't have time to answer, which I'm going to do this morning, is how do you get that way? There is a way of knowing what the sharps are and what the flats are, and what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you this chart once again. This is the middle C right here. This note is halfway between the bass clef and the treble clef, and it's got one line between them. It is the top note of the bass clef. It is the lowest note of the treble clef. When you actually do it, you see I have two stems here. Excuse me, I have two stems here. One for the treble and one for the bass. And I can go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, or in the other direction, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. So anyway, I gotta take a drink here. We start off with that as kind of a central point in terms of where the keys start from. Remember, I showed you the lowest one. Here's the C, this is the middle C. This is the middle C, it corresponds to this, it corresponds to that. So we take a two-section, octave session of the whole keyboard to show you this. Now, I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to show you another chart here, which will explain what I'm talking about. There. Now we'll get that set up. It does make some sense when you stop to think about it. Here is the two octave sessions. This is a lower middle C right here. There is something that's known the circle of fifths. It's called the circle of fifths. And what it does is it adds a sharp or a flat after every 5 steps. But I want to show you how it does it. From C to D is a step. We have a half steps and steps in the keyboard. This is one step from C to D, one step from D to E, and then from E to F is a half step. To get a full step, we have to go from E to F sharp, because this is a half step. This would be another half step, so from E to F sharp would be a full step. And then if we were to go, and we can do this up and down the keyboard, you can do the same thing for like D. D, E is a step. E to F is a half step. But to get the E, to get to a full step, we have to go from the E to the F sharp. That gets a full step. And then from that, F to G is a half step. G to A is a full step. A to B is a full step. B to C is a half step. So what you're doing when you do this is that you have got one step, a half a step. Let's take a look at the key of C. It has no sharps or flats in it, but I'm going to start right here. C to D, one step. D to E, one step. E to F, a half step. F to G, a step. G to A is a step. A to B is a step. B to C is a half step. And you can follow this through on the different keys. Supposing we start with the key of G. I'll start it right here. G to A is a step. A to B is a step. B to C is a half step. C to D is in order to get a C to a full step there from B to C, you'd have to go to the C sharp. C to D is a step. E to F is a half step. So if you want a full step, you need to go from the E to the F sharp. The E to the F sharp makes a full step. So what you have in scales is that you have a series of full steps and you have some half steps put in. And it makes for a full scale if you do it this way. But what notes get sharped and what notes get flatted depends upon the note that you start on. So doing it with the key of C, and I think I'll do it this way because I think this is going to be a little bit easier to see because it's a little bit larger. So we'll do the key of C. C to D, one step. D to E, one step. E to F, a half step. F to G is a full step. G to A, a full step. A to B, a full step. B to C, a half step. So you have a formula here. You go step, step, half step, 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 half step. Step, step, half step. E to F is a half step. F to G is a step. G to A step. A to B step. And then B to C half step. So that's kind of a formula. You know that that's the way it's going to be. It's going to be step, step, half step, 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 half step. And the notes that get sharped will be the notes that happen to have a sharp in order to make it be either a full step or a half step, whatever it's supposed to be. Now, and the way to get the keys is this. You count 5 steps. C, D, E, F, G. You put in a sharp. And then you start at the G, G, A, B, C, D. You put in another sharp. D, E, F, G, A, you put in a sharp. So every 5 steps, you add a sharp. So you start with your C and you go 5 steps, C, D, E, F, G. That's why, and you put in a sharp. The sharp you have to put in is the F sharp. Now, and that's natural for that. But you see, the key is still in the key of G because you've taken 5 steps and then you end up on the G, and that G requires that the F be sharp in order to get that formula of step, step, half step, 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 half step. That's kind of like the formula how all the major C's, how all the major scales are. And you start on a certain note and you use that formula. You'll have 1 step, 2 steps, a half a step, and then a step and a step and a step and a half a step. And that way it comes out all right. So when you go 5 up, C, D, E, F, G, that root note is the G, and the scale starts on the G, but it still has to follow that formula. Step, step, G to A is a step, A to B is a step, B to C is a half step. C to D is a step, D to E is a step, E to F is a step. That's why you get the F sharp on the key of G. You have to go from that E to the F sharp to make that step. Otherwise, you've got a different key. And then you go on from there. The G to A is a step, A to B is a step, and B to C is a half step. So depending upon the note that you start with, that note that you start with is the root note. So in this case, if I start with D, then that D would be the root note, even though D doesn't have a sharp in it if you look at the scale. So it's like a formula. You have so many steps and you have so many half steps in any kind of a scale. Now we're talking about major scales. I'm not talking about minor scales or diminished scales or augmented scales. I mean, there's all kinds of scales. Chords that are augmented, chords that are diminished, you know, that's a whole different picture. But for regular major and major chord, it can be sharps, it can have some flats in it, but it's still a major chord. and it follows that kind of formula of a step, a half step, a step, a step, a step, and a half step. So in the C, and I'm going to show it to you in the C because it's the easiest way to do it. C to D step, D to E step, E to F half step, F to G step, G to A step, A to B step, B to C half step. So starting on the C, you could use that formula without putting a sharp anywhere or without putting a flat anywhere, but it's the easiest way to describe it. So if you go from C to 5 steps, C, D, E, F, G, your first sharp is going to be in the key of G in order to preserve the way that you have your half steps and your steps and how they line up. So here's the key of G. Now the G is not sharp. However, it's in the key of G because when you take your 5 steps, you land on G, and G is where you're going to start your next scale, and that happens to be the root note. But you have to end up, however, by having your half steps and your steps where they're supposed to be. So G to A is a step, A to B is a step, B to C is a half step, and that's okay. The formula calls for 2 steps and a half step, and there it is. C to D is a step, C to D, D to E is a step, and E to F is a half step. So the way that, and then of course you come back on the G again. So in the key of G, you're following the same formula, but since they're starting in G instead of another note, then you have to take the steps the same. 1 step, 2 steps, half step. 1 step, 2 steps, and then you get to the F sharp. That's going to be a full step, and then half step back to G again, and it works out. So every five keys is another key. C, D, E, F, G has 1 sharp, and you go follow that formula. Then you start on the same note that you stopped. G, A, B, C, D, that's the second note. You add that extra sharp. That's going to be the root note. That's not the note that's sharp, but you add an extra sharp. And then following that formula, then D, E, F, G, A, you get a 3rd sharp. The root note is A. A is not sharp, but if you follow the pattern of every 5 steps, it happens to land on A, so the root note is A, and then you follow that formula of step, step, half step, 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 half step, and you know from that which notes are sharp and which notes are not. So I hope this doesn't seem too complicated for you, but this is the way that it's done. And I didn't bring it in, but they have charts. It's called the circle of fifths, and it's a whole circle, and it goes through the same thing that I'm telling you, but it does it in a circle. It has the sharps and the flats and so forth in a circle, but it doesn't write out the keys. It just arranges it so that you see what it is. So C, D, E, F, G, 1 sharp, G, A, B, C, D, 2 sharps, D, E, F, G, A, and that's 3 sharps. And I wouldn't go any further than that because recorders can't play 4 sharps, you know. And if I was to do it on the bass, let's see, I think what I'll need to do, it's the same formula. If I start with a C, C, B, A, G, F, that's 1 flat. F, E, D, C, B, there's 2 flats. So you can do it with the flats going down. You do it with the sharps going up. Going down is basically bass clef, and going up is basically treble clef. And that's how it's all figured. C to D, 1 step. D to E, 1 step. E to F, half a step. F to G, 1 step. G to A, 1 step, A to B, 1 step, and B to C is the half a step. That's the major keys. Step, step, half a step. Step, 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 half a step. Okay? And depending upon the note that you start on, that depends upon how many of these keys for flats and sharps are actually going to be used. Following that formula of step, step, half step. Now, this may seem a little complicated, but that's what scales are. They're a combination of half steps and whole steps, and they fall in different places depending upon what note you start on. The note that you start on is the root note. If you start on G, then that's the root note. G itself is not sharp, but that's the root note, because if you follow it up, 5, 5, 5, you're going to end up on the G, and that's the root note of the key of G. And then following that formula, certain notes, in this case it's going to be the F, that's going to have to be sharp to follow through on that formula of step, step, half step, 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 half step. So if I take my bigger chart here and put it on, that might make it a little bit easier to understand. I'm just telling you about the concept, but that's how they get to be what they are. This middle C, halfway between the top, between the treble clef and the bass clef, starts everything. It starts everything. You go from that middle C, because middle C is the top note of the bass clef. It is the lowest note of the treble clef. And so you just count up 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's your G. It's going to have 1 sharp. And G, A, B, C, D, there it is. It's going to have 2 sharps. D, E, F, G, A is going to have 3 sharps. And I could go further than that, A, B, C, D, E, and you're going to get 4 sharps. But, you know, recorders aren't going to play that. And if you go down, C, B, A, G, F, the key of F, however, it's going to have 1 flat. F, E, D, C, B, that's going to have 2 flats. All the way down, the same thing. You count 5, and it's a flat. You count another 5, it's a second flat. You keep the sharps and the flats that you already have, and you add 1 more to the mix. So in the key of G, let me see, the key of C, C, D, E, F, G, 1 sharp. And you keep that sharp, and you start on the same G that you left. G, A, B, C, D, that's 2 sharps. You keep the first sharp, you add another one, and you start on the same note that you left. D, E, F, G, A, you add a sharp. You don't get rid of the 2 that you already have. You keep those 2 and you add a third one. A, B, C, D, E, you add another sharp, so you have 4 sharps. Keeping the same ones as you have and adding 1 sharp every five steps up. And you do the same thing if you're going down. C, B, A, D, F. All right, that's going to have 1 flat. F, E, D, C, B. That's going to have 2 flats. And that B will be the root note. F will be the root note up here. And then you go from the F, E, D, C, B, B flat. And so therefore you have F, B, D, G, A, D, C, I think is how it runs. So to the sharps, I think it's a little bit easier to understand if I'm doing the sharps. C, D, 1 step. D, E, 1 step. E, F, a half a step. Why? There's no black note in here, so this is a half a step. And the B and the C, of course, there's no black note here, so that's going to be a half a step too. You're always going to have a half a step between the E and the F and the B and the C. But what if you don't want to have a half step there? What if you need to have a whole step? Well, you can easily go from the E to the F sharp. That's going to be a whole step. You know, that's how the G gets a key of F, gets the F as being sharp. Or if you're in the key of B and you don't want to have a half step between the B and the C, what do? You jump to the C sharp. That's a half step, that's a half step. So you can go from B to C sharp, that gets you a full step right there. So if you stop to think about it, it does make some sense. I think what I might do next time, I don't have it with me now, is to bring in a circle of fifths and go over this again so it'll be maybe more understandable. But the key of C is the easiest one to understand. And it's the same. It just is the same pattern, but depending upon the note that you started on, C to E, C to D, one step, D to E, one step, E to F, one half step. There's no black note. F to G, one step. G to A, one step. A to B, one step. And B to C, a half step, because there is no black note right here. So it's step, step, half step. Then step, 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 half step. If I look at the recorder, what's a whole step? Well, a whole step is just a full step between notes. But if you're dealing with sharps and flats, or if I want two sharps, that's the way that you have major scales, half steps and whole steps, and you put them together in such a way that it makes a full scale. All the way up and down. And the scales sound a little different because the octaves are a little bit different, but it's still following that same pattern of step, step, half step, 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 half step. The C is the easiest because it turns out it does that without any sharps or without any flats, and you can see it easily. In the key of G, you have to add that F sharp to make it right. In the key of D, you have to add two sharps to make it right. And so it goes all the way up and down the keyboard. For the key of F, you go down and you have that one flat. It's going to be B flat. And but it's going to be in the key of F because it's the F that's involved. That becomes the root note. Now, it may sound quite complicated, but that's the way that it is, and that's how the notes start. It starts with that middle C going up or going down. 5 steps up is a G, G, A, B, C, D, another sharp, that's D right there. D, E, F, G, A, another sharp, that's A right there. And so it goes on all the way up and down the keyboard. That's how the notes get to be what they are. But I do want to review this again next time because even as I'm explaining it, I'm afraid I'm sounding a little bit complicated here. But that's the way it is. You have that pattern of steps and half steps. And then when you start on a different note, those half steps will end on a different note. And it may be you might have to sharp something to get what the step that you need to have. Or it may be that you need to add a flat to get the note that you need to have to follow that pattern. And so I'm going to review this next time because I think it needs some review, and it's a little hard to explain, and I want to, if I can find them, bring you in an actual circle of fifths so you can see it on a circle. But the easiest way, I think, is just to be able to count 5. What key is it in? Well, 4 sharps, 5 sharps, 2 sharps, 1 sharp. What key is that? Start counting from middle C and go up to it, and it'll tell you what key it's in. So I'm going to close it for now because it is a little complicated. I did bring some music to play. We'll do that next time. But I want to review this with you because it's important that you know this. And it's an easy way to know how many sharps and flats are in what key, all following that one pattern, all depending upon the note that you start on, because that's going to mean that you have to have sharps and flats to hold to that pattern. If you can't hold to that pattern, then you don't have a major scale. That's the way it works out. It works out mathematically, and you can see that music is mathematical too, and so you need to remember that. It can be quite complicated, but I think the easiest way is to think 5 steps, 1 sharp, another 5 steps, another sharp, another 5 steps, another sharp, starting on the 5 on the one that you stopped on. The one that you stopped on becomes one, and then you go through it that way. So I'm going to close it here. We'll do some more of it next time, and then we'll have some music that I want you to play, going into intervals between sounds and between the songs and between notes and so forth. So I hope you'll join me then. We'll close it for now.